Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language is fluid. Yes, and Latino voters are fluid. And then there's abortion, a difficult issue for the Democrats to lose on, but they're trying. For decades, liberals have said if only men could get pregnant, this wouldn't even be an issue.
It's been nearly a year since Bill Maher launched his no-holds-barred war on the woke movement. And here's a spoiler, he's not backing down. His latest target, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. While AOC's been crisscrossing the country, delivering her progressive message like a political GPS, Maher isn't buying what she's selling. Hit that subscribe button. Let's break this down.
Every month I see a new poll reporting how much Latinos despise the woke term Latinx. It's about as popular with them as a reboot of Speedy Gonzales. Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language is fluid. Yes, and Latino voters are fluid.
Here's how it all started. Bill Maher did what he does best, asking the uncomfortable questions no one else wants to touch. This time, his sights were set on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her relentless push for a far-left agenda. Let's be honest, more and more Americans are starting to reject. Maher openly challenged the logic. Why double down on a political ideology that's become increasingly toxic, divisive, and out of touch with everyday people? A reasonable person might stop, reflect, maybe even change course, but not AOC. She's convinced she holds the moral high ground, ready to impose her progressive vision, whether America's on board or not. But here's the real twist. Maher wasn't done. What came next wasn't just criticism, it was a full-scale dismantling. No spin, no filters, just a brutal surgical takedown that left no room for excuses. And trust me, you'll want to see this for yourself. Stick around, because this is where it gets brutal.
And then there's abortion, a difficult issue for the Democrats to lose on, but they're trying. For decades, liberals have said if only men could get pregnant, this wouldn't even be an issue. And abortion rights are women's rights. Well, that's wrong now. Or as the kids say, hold up. When the wokey end of the progressive spectrum talks about abortion now, they shy away from that word, women, and prefer terms like birthing people.
And that, right there, is the hill Democrats chose to die on, refusing to clearly define what a woman is. Just a decade ago, this wasn't even controversial. Everyone understood the basics. Women menstruate, can become pregnant, and give birth. That was science, not politics. Then came the progressive shift. Suddenly men could be women, gender became fluid, and even asking questions made you a bigot. But everyday Americans weren't buying it. They pushed back, asking fair, reasonable questions. And what did they get in return? Condescending lectures, cancel campaigns, and smug scorn from elite bubbles and coastal echo chambers. While the left clung tighter to their new dogma, much of the country simply tuned out. And the result? One of the most brutal electoral defeats Democrats have seen in years. Not because voters were hateful, but because they were tired of being told that reality itself was offensive. Democrats didn't just lose votes, they lost trust. And once that's gone, good luck getting it back.
And more of them now than ever are identifying as Republican. So are Asian Americans, whose support for Democrats is down 16 points since the last election. A lot of that is because, in the name of achieving equity in schools, Democrats in deep blue cities have made it a mission to eliminate the advanced programs at which Asian kids excel.
And that right there is exactly what happens when you keep pushing people into a corner. Eventually, they push back, and not in the way you expect. AOC and her party marched through deep blue states like they had a political blank check. Untouchable, unquestionable, unstoppable. They thought they could ram through any radical policy, convinced their base would follow blindly, no matter how extreme. But here's the thing, they miscalculated. What they didn't see coming was the silent revolt. Voters who once cheered them on flipped, fast and without warning. And where did they go? Straight to the GOP, that's right. The very group AOC spent years demonizing. This wasn't a slow shift, it was a political earthquake. Overnight, loyal supporters became outspoken critics, and those Democratic strongholds suddenly showing cracks. Now the real question is this just a bump in the road for AOC, or are we witnessing the beginning of a total collapse of everything she's built? Stick around, because Bill Maher's next move might just tip this whole thing over the edge.
Last week, an 85% Latino congressional district on the border with Mexico, which had always voted heavily Democratic, flipped to the red team. And the campaign manager for the losing Democrat said, "We gave up a reliably Democratic congressional seat for no reason at all. We deserve to know why." Well, aside from your terrible attitude, I'm going to tell you why. Because these voters stopped seeing your candidate as their lawyer.
If you've been wondering why Bill Maher keeps dropping lines like, "my lawyer, their lawyer," and don't overthink it. This isn't about actual courtroom drama. This is political theater at its sharpest. What Maher's really saying is brutally simple. Voters expect their elected officials to be their advocates, their lawyers, fighting for their interests, not arguing for the other side. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. AOC and her progressive allies clearly missed that memo. Instead of standing with the people, they've been talking down to them, lecturing, grandstanding, and pushing policies that make regular voters stop and ask, wait, whose side are you even on? And Maher, he's not just shouting into the void, he's methodically laying out his case. One jab at a time, he's exposing the widening gap between what voters expect and what these so-called representatives actually deliver. The real irony? AOC talks like she's the underdog fighting the system, but in the courtroom of public opinion, she's starting to look like the one on trial. And when Maher finally drops his closing argument, believe me, it won't be gentle. Stay tuned. The verdict's coming, and it might just shake the whole foundation.
If you're a parent and wanted schools to reopen a lot sooner than they did after COVID shutdowns, or think maybe your kid is getting a bad education partly because it's nearly impossible to fire a lousy teacher, yeah, you're going to say, "Congratulations, teachers, you got yourself a good lawyer. The Democratic Party's always got your back, 100%. But I've noticed my kid is kind of an idiot. So I may be looking for new representation."
It wasn't just Latino voters that AOC and her progressive allies managed to alienate. They hit something even more fundamental, America's education system. And the fallout? Let's just say this report card has failure written all over it. A few years ago, with the Biden administration leading the charge and the far left cheering from the sidelines, they pushed policies that made it harder to remove underperforming teachers. Sounds noble on paper, right? In reality, it handcuffed school administrators across the country. The result, a free fall in student achievement. According to the nation's report card, average math scores for 13-year-olds plummeted 9 points between 2020 and 2023, the biggest drop in half a century. Reading scores dropped by 4 points, and the very teachers responsible, protected. Like priceless museum pieces, untouched, unaccountable. Meanwhile, AOC's out here firing up crowds with buzzwords, and Bernie Sanders is still stuck on the same tired class warfare speeches from the 1970s. And parents? They're at home staring at their kids' grades, wondering what happened. This isn't just a bad policy, it's a generational disaster. Which brings us to the real question. With a record like this, does the Sanders AOC wing actually have any shot at helping the Democrats bounce back? Or are they about to march the party straight into academic and electoral detention? Stick around. Bill Maher's next takedown might just be the final exam. And spoiler, they're nowhere near passing.
President Biden wants to cancel hundreds of billions of dollars in student debt. Okay, but the poorer 2/3 of American kids who don't get a college degree are going to say, why should the people who didn't go to college and make less money subsidize the people who did go and make more? You want me to chip in so some liberal arts college can build a bigger rock wall? You're not my lawyer.
Sometimes I sit back and think about the policies Democrats have tried and spectacularly failed to push through, and honestly, it's hard not to laugh. And I'm not talking about small mistakes or red tape disasters. I'm talking about headline making, full-blown policy faceplants, the kind that would be hilarious if they weren't dragging real people down with them. Take the whole defund the police movement. That sounded great on activist Twitter, right up until crime spiked in major cities, and suddenly even the loudest supporters were tiptoeing away in silence. Or remember the rent cancellation crusade? Sure, it played well in college dorm rooms, but collapsed under the weight of basic economics. And don't even get me started on the brilliant idea to scrap standardized testing. Apparently expecting students to meet basic educational standards is now oppressive. As Maher said, it's like the Democrats wrote a guide called How to Lose the Middle in 10 Easy Steps. And they're acing it, and here's the kicker. After all of that, these same geniuses actually think they deserve another shot at running the country. This isn't politics, this is comedy. But Bill Maher? He's not about to let them walk off stage quietly. He's here to call it exactly what it is, a circus of bad ideas dressed up as progress.
When he ran in 2020, Bernie Sanders said he would legalize marijuana on his first day as president, but that the business of selling pot would be awarded first to those who suffered most from the drug war. And you know what? I can't argue with that instinct. The drug war has been a horrendous instrument of prejudice and punishment for racial minorities, so it seems fair that they jumped the line for weed franchises the way Indians did for casinos. But it's also what's holding up Republican support for legalizing weed nationally, which would be good for everybody. And these are the hard, practical choices the Democrats have to weigh.
Bill Maher delivers a brutal truth here, and it's one that deserves your full attention. If Democrats are serious about winning back power, they need to do a lot more than throw around empty slogans and lecture from their moral high horses. They have to confront their failures directly. And here's the crazy part. Actually sit down and talk to the people they've ignored for years. Not talk at them, not assume they know what working Americans want from some air-conditioned office in DC, but sit with them face to face. No buzzwords, no judgment, just real conversations. Why? Because guessing what voters need based on focus groups and think tank reports is exactly how they lost them in the first place. Maher's not telling them to abandon their values. He's telling them to reconnect, rebuild trust, earn back the respect they threw away chasing headlines. Otherwise, they're just shouting into an empty echo chamber while the very voters they need have already moved on. Time's running out. The only question left is, will they wake up before the window closes for good?
As with all these issues, the wavering voter is saying to her lawyer, the Democratic Party, hey, so happy for you that you have so many other clients and that you care so much about their problems and all the pro bono work you do. But you're supposed to be my lawyer. The Democrats need to be like the lawyers you see on billboards. You hurt, we fight.
Bill Maher didn't just take shots at the Democrats. He held up a mirror. From ignoring everyday voters to twisting basic truths, the party has drifted so far off course they barely resemble the people they claim to represent. Sure, Maher's jokes get laughs, but behind the humor is a brutal reality check, exposing failures in policy, messaging, and plain old common sense. If Democrats want a real comeback, it's not going to happen by doubling down on denial. It's going to take real listening, honest self-reflection, and serious course correction. Because if they don't pivot soon, voters won't just drift away, they'll slam the door behind them. That's it for today's video. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.